All right, everyone. Thanks for coming to today's Lunch and Learn. This is a new lecture series we're trying out at the museum. It's going to be on the third Wednesday of every month. Today I'm going to be your speaker today. I'm also the marketing director at the Erie Art Museum. I've also been a photographer for over 15 years, which is kind of hard for me to say now. I'm not that old, but the years are adding up. I'm a videographer for over 5 years. Started at the museum in May of 2021, and I mostly do things like the website and sending out emails and stuff. But another part of my job is taking pictures of the artwork and trying to build a digitization of our collection. There's a lot of challenges to doing that, and I kind of wanted to share some of the process of that with you and some tips and tricks that I've learned along the way, especially since there's going to be the spring show. Submissions are due this Friday, so I just wanted to let everyone a reminder of that, so a bit timely of a talk for that. If you're planning on trying to photograph your artwork now to submit to the spring show, this might be able to help you out with that. We're going to kind of go over a little bit about 2D photography, common challenges and solutions, as well as 3D artwork and some of the new technologies that we're bringing into the museum to create 3D models of sculptures. Some future plans that we have for the museum, as well as giving some time for some question and answer. So again, some of those brief announcements. I wanted to bring up that spring show submissions are due this Friday at midnight, so it's an exciting time. Get your submissions in. Also, if you're interested in photography and different ways of using photography, there's an experimental photography class that's starting this Saturday. There's details about that on our website. Seems really cool and exciting, so I hope you decide to join us at that as well. So to start, we're just going to look at a piece of photographed artwork. This is a Joseph Plotkin piece called Red House. So one final announcement is that I wanted to say that we're working on an exhibition, Joseph Plotkin, The Making of an Artist, which will be opening at the end of the month, and it's going to be the feature of our next Up Close with the Collection on January 27th. And again, you can find more details about that on our website. So to get started, 2D artwork. Every time I photograph something, it's always a new puzzle. There's always unique challenges to photographing art, whether it's how much access you have to the art, what kind of lighting are you dealing with, how much space are you using to be able to photograph it, dealing with different reflections and issues with keystoning. Everything's different, and it's always kind of fun and exciting to figure out how I'm going to get a good digital representation of the artwork that I have access to. So kind of the first thing to go over with photographing artwork, your first thing you're dealing with is the difference in lighting. So I have a picture here. This is the same picture of the entrance to Entre Pontes y Mujeres, which is right across the room from here, which you're past to get into here. So on the left image, you notice that the tones are a lot warmer. That's because in the top left corner, I'm using that to tell the photo that's what I think white should be. And on the right-hand side, I have the red circle there over by a couple of the art pieces where I'm saying that's a white wall. So the software is trying to interpret two different ways of showing white or a neutral tone. And so this is just depicting white balance and color temperature. Different types of light kind of emit light and reflect light in different ways. Things like daylight tends to be a little bit cooler. It shows a lot more blue tones because the sky is blue. Whereas warm lights like incandescents have a lot of a warmer tone. Further to complicate this, different technologies like fluorescent light bulbs have a little bit of a green hue to them. So all these, if you have different ones in the same space, can make it really difficult to accurately represent artwork. Because the kind of important things, you want to make sure the colors are correct. Just to reiterate, white balancing is calibrating the camera to what a neutral tone is. And those lights tend to either be cooler or warmer. We can use tools to correct this in the camera, or by using a raw format, we can correct it in software afterwards. The key point is that we want to make sure it's consistent. Whether it's a cool light or a warm light, we just want to make sure we're using consistent light to light up the art piece. Just to briefly talk about camera settings, getting a little bit into the weeds into this. Whenever you're setting up to take a photograph of an artwork, you kind of have a set recipe to how you want to set your settings on the camera. So again, like I said, we're going to use raw formats because they'll let us adjust the color temperature in post rather than being baked into the file on a JPEG. Our aperture is going to be determined by making sure we get enough depth of field to keep the entire piece in focus. So we want it high enough that everything's in focus, but not so high that we are cutting out all the light and not being able to get enough to have good exposure. Shutter speed is usually kind of doesn't really matter if you're using, for example, like flashes, which I typically use to photograph artwork. We're basically balancing the flashes between cutting out the ambient light, but still letting us sync with our flashes that we have. Camera gain, ISO, the camera sensitivity, all those kind of mean the same thing. Basically, we want to keep that as low as possible so that we don't introduce noise into the image file. So there's all these techniques kind of come together to set up a recipe for what we want to do for photographing artwork. And there's some tools that we can use to kind of help with that too. One of them I show here in front of this photograph. This one's in Entre Plantas y Mujeres. This is a data color checker 24. And you see it has a bunch of swatches with colors on it. So we're using that as a known reference. Data color knows what exactly these should be looking like on a screen. So we take a photo with that alongside the artwork, and then inside my software I can go in and say, okay, I'm going to set the neutral tones to the white, grays, and blacks on the bottom, and then I can use the software to determine, like, is this a little bit too blue? Is it light a little bit too green? Because every light that we use is going to be different. This gives us a reference point to check that on. And I kind of want to note on that, you can't really eyeball a lot of this stuff. Because the lighting sources are so different, even when I'm using a calibrated monitor upstairs in our office, if we happen to have a sunny day, that's going to affect how that screen represents the color. So this kind of takes out my human eye element to determine if it's correct or not, and use a reference point to accurately represent color. So the other type of problem we come up with when we're photographing artwork is reflections. This is probably the one, if you ever try to photograph artwork, the one that you deal with the most. And it's the one that uses the most like problem-solving skills and trying to get around. So this is another image from our gallery. This is from Maddy, Persephone. And we have some reflections here down in the corner. This is from the windows that are across the hall from it. So obviously this is kind of like glare that you don't really want when you're photographing. There's a few different types of reflection that we have to deal with. There's diffuse reflection, which is practically everything that's lighting up the light source, and then direct reflection or specular reflection, which is kind of like that harsh light source that you can directly see shining off the glass. There's a few different ways that we try to work around this. All the different angles that we are photographing the artwork at that can cause a reflection is considered a family of angles. Those are the ones you want to avoid. And I have some diagrams here to kind of help show these, because it's kind of hard to visualize what we're meaning with this. So this kind of represents diffuse reflection. Light is hitting the artwork, and anywhere you move the camera, you're going to see the same reflection. That's kind of the reflection that we want. It's lighting up the artwork. It's just how we expect light to work. With direct reflection, the camera on the right there is going to see the bright spot on the painting, but the other two wouldn't see anything at all. They'd just see the diffuse reflection. So we're looking for the right angle when we photograph artwork where we just get the diffuse reflection and avoid the direct reflection. There's an additional type of reflection called polarized direct reflection. A little bit beyond the scope of this talk, but I'll have some references that you can look into that a little bit more later on dealing with that. So this kind of represents what our family of angles are. So I get to choose where I want to put my flashes. If I put it too close to my camera, I'm going to end up getting a light spot on the artwork. But if I move it outside of that family of angles where it causes reflections, I can get a nice diffuse reflection off the artwork and get an accurate photograph. To kind of show a practical example of this, this is another Plovkin piece that we were taking a photograph of. And you see the bright spot on the bottom right-hand side of the image. That's that direct reflection that we were talking about, shining off of the light. There's a little close-up of it so you can see, because our light's too close to the camera, we're getting that little hot spot on the artwork. There's a few different ways to get outside of the family of angles here. One way to commonly do that is to move your camera further away from the piece and zoom in. This narrows the angles that are going to cause direct reflections and gives us more flexibility on where we can put the flash outside of that. The issue with going too extreme on those angles is usually because artwork has frames and it's inset inside those frames. So if you put your lights too far to the side, you're not going to get shadows from the frame onto the artwork. Sometimes you're working on finding a happy medium between those two, where you're trying to avoid direct reflection but not cause too much of a shadow, and you got to find your best spot for that. And that's part of the fun challenges of photographing artwork. So just again to see this reflection here on the art piece, this is moving those lights over to the side, so we're outside that reflection. So this is not changing at all the power of the lights or anything like that. It's just moving them to the side, and that allows us to capture a good representation of the art piece. An additional tool that we have are polarizers. These are filters that make the light waves all move in a straight line. This is an additional thing we can use to try and cut down on glare on if you have very thick paint that's really glossy and it's always kind of shining and making little sparkles in the corners. Polarizers can help us cut down on that a bit. But using those really cuts down the amount of light that we have to use to light the artwork and can kind of strain flashes and equipment. So we try to avoid that if we can and use the family of angles to help us get a good photograph of the artwork. Another way to deal with reflections, and this is again that piece from earlier, I was able to avoid the reflection of that by simply putting a flag in between the windows and the piece. And so we're removing that reflection from being a light source on the work. So instead of, if we don't have control over the lights ourselves, we can find a way to block the light that is shining on it so that we can get more control. The other big thing we deal with when we're photographing artwork is keystoning. So this is a piece right in the Revolution Chachal, right outside the hallway here. It's a little bit higher up on the wall because there's another piece down below it, and I'm not quite tall enough to be able to reach my camera up to get straight level with it. So we are experiencing a little bit of keystoning at the top. And what that means is that the parallel lines of that frame are eventually converging, which is not supposed to do. So this is typically, if we can, we want to control it in camera, and we do that by making sure that the camera is level with the piece, and we're using too wide of a lens that introduces distortion. But you'll kind of find a little bit of this. It's really hard to get everything exact if you don't have the picture straight up on the wall and then really heavy duty tripods and everything and then measuring stuff. If you're just kind of walking around when you get a photograph of artwork, this is probably going to introduce itself in some way or another. But I use Lightroom to kind of help correct this. There's a lot of different software editing tools have ways to deal with this. We're using the guided tool in Lightroom's transform tools. And what I'm basically doing is telling the software, I want that bottom green of the frame, the top green of the frame to be parallel, and then I want the two sides of the frame to be parallel. These can be a little bit difficult to see, but there's you can see the kind of guided lines I have on there on the left-hand side. This will make those lines parallel to each other and correct that keystoning. And also has the added benefit of kind of leveling the work if we happen to have a little bit of a rotational difference on that. And so that's our fixed artwork piece, no longer with the converging lines. Another challenge that we have in photographing artwork is some of it is very small. In the Bacon Gallery right now, we have Nicole Martin's Painterly Polaroids. There were some really cool things done with these Polaroids, but they're kind of hard to see. And we do have some enlargements in the exhibit, but we kind of wanted to push that even further. So we used a macro lens and took between 4 and 6 photographs of these small Polaroids, and we're able to combine them together to get one very high resolution image that lets us get very tiny details and blown up digitally. So people can interact with the artwork in a different way that they normally could. You can see this in the exhibit right now with our projection that we have on the wall. So Polaroids that are only like 3 by 3 inches can be blown up to the size of an entire wall. And it's a really different way that we can interact with artwork and explore things that we couldn't otherwise. Moving on to 3D artwork. One of the main tools that we've been kind of experimenting with over the past year or two is photogrammetry. Photogrammetry is basically combining hundreds and hundreds of photographs to create a virtual 3D model of artwork. So the software we use is called Reality Capture. on this graph, there's a bunch of little dots surrounding this little model in the middle. Each one of those dots represents a photograph that I took. And this is of a bronze sculpture that we have in the collection. We basically set it down on a little Lazy Susan table turner, spun it around, and like every few degrees, we took another photo. We keep doing that all the way around, move the camera up a little bit, and do the same process again. And the software takes that and then tries to find similar points in all the different photographs, and then puts a little pixel there. And the end result of this is the model that we can manipulate and light it up in different ways. And share this. We have this, if you search for us on Sketchfab right now, you go on Sketchfab and look for Erie Art Museum, you can see a lower res version of this model on there. And this is a kind of cool way because this is not only a sculpture that we would allow people to normally handle, but you could take this model and turn around, look at it from different angles, light it in different ways. You could put it in a video game if you wanted to. There's a lot of different applications that we could use for this. So we're excited to get more sculptural pieces to be added to this. One of the big ones we did recently was the Avalon. So we currently don't have the Avalon on display anymore. We needed to do some repairs into the room it was in. It was kind of time to like give the piece some tender love and care. So once we had the glass removed from the piece, it was a unique opportunity for me to go in and get photographs of it to try and make a 3D model. This is particularly challenging because there's a lot of nooks and crannies on this piece and little different areas that one photograph wouldn't be able to capture. And so the result of that is quite a strange cloud of different images that we use. And you can see like the individual images on the right-hand side that we used to create this. I think this one took around 270 to 300 photographs. And of course, this piece was too big for us to put on a turntable, so that resulted in me having to physically move the camera around the piece to gather all of those photographs. Just to talk a little bit about future plans that we have. While I continue building the high-res digitization of the museum collection, we want to look into a way to provide public access to those photos. So we are looking into maybe partnering with Google Arts and Culture or other resources to be able to give people access to that. But if anyone has any particular ideas of how they'd like to access those kind of files, I'm open to hearing about that. We do have some current resources available on the website. We have virtual tours that we've made with Erie Multimedia. We use a Matterport 360 scanner for those. And you could go in and see exhibits even after they're gone here. You can travel through them and do your own little tour. We are continuing to add to that as we get new exhibitions. Kind of a big reference that I use to learn about photographing artwork and material science and light physics is Light Science and Magic, Introduction to Photographic Lighting. This is basically like the textbook on photographic lighting. This is the 5th edition that I have. I think they're on like the 6th or 7th now. But I highly recommend it as an additional resource if you want to deep dive into like the material science and the physics of reflection and how light works on objects. It's really interesting. So I want to thank you all again for coming, and if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me on Instagram or email, or feel free to ask me now. Yes?
I have a question.
Yeah.
So when you show those angles of the lighting, and you show the light sources being outside of that purview, is that when we see somebody using, like, say, a light stand?
Yes.
Where, you know, or sometimes I'll see a photographer using a flash that's in a different place and they've got like a remote control to do the photo and the flash at the same time. How would somebody do something like that at home if they don't have that kind of equipment? Can you use a lamp? Can you use?
Yeah, so this doesn't necessarily have to be a flash that you're using. It could just be your lamp at home, and this is where you happen to position it so that you're not getting the glare. I would preface that you would probably want 2 of them if you can, and have them be the same if possible. If you have like 2 table lamps or something, set them up on either end of the table, put the piece on the other end, and then photograph in between them. That's usually really easy. Typically, there's a copy setup would be having 2 lights at 45-degree angles to the piece, and then both shining towards it. What can be tricky with that is you'll run into that you'll still find issues if the light is too close to the artwork. So you need to pull everything kind of back, have lights further away, and have your camera further away and zoom in. So typically, if you can have two on either end of a room and you can zoom in with your phone, or if you have a camera with a little bit of a zoom, that's a way to get more even light on the piece.
Very helpful, thank you.
Oh, no problem. Any other questions?
Can you go back to the slide of the Nicole Martin piece that was split into four? So how do you put those back together? What, are you using like a specific software to put them back together?
Yeah, there's quite a few different software that does it. And this is done in Lightroom and Photoshop. So they basically, it's the same thing done to make panoramas. They kind of the software will find a point where the data overlaps, and then it makes a stitch there and connects them into one.
So the program is finding where that stitch is. You're not having to like go in and really make sure that you're not like overlapping by 1 pixel or something.
No, the software does that for you now. That used to be how you had to do it, but now the software makes it a lot easier. Sometimes it can make mistakes, so you need to keep the overlap kind of consistent, and that kind of helps it out. Usually about a fifth overlap is what I do on each image, and that seems to be enough for it to make a smooth transition.
Do you have software recommendations?
What I use almost every day is Lightroom and Photoshop. There's a lot of them out there now. Adobe kind of has a subscription, which can be kind of rough to pay for all the time. There's like Affinity Photo now and Luminaire. I think all those have those kind of tools now. Anything else? Go ahead.
I didn't realize how much detail there is into what you're doing working with. So I kind of have a silly question. When you've taken a photograph of a piece of art, what was the most amount of pictures you needed to take to be like, that's perfect?
So for a regular 2D artwork, it's normally fairly simple. Usually I'll just run into a problem and it's just a couple more photos to fix it.
Yeah.
There was a Plavkin one. When you see the show in a month, it's like the first one when you're walking in. It had just the right amount of like shininess in certain parts of it that I always got kind of a bad glare on it. So that was the trickiest one. I actually photographed that one on 2 or 3 different occasions, probably like 20 different times, until I finally found the spot that kind of met that goal of not causing too much shadow on the artwork, but then still not causing too much glare. On the extreme end, we're in situations where we kind of call like impossible scenarios, where like if a photograph is right up against a wall and you can't get a light on the other side of it because there's a wall there, that's when polarizers start coming into play, where you will take a polarizing filter and put one on your light so that the light coming from your light source is all in one straight line. And then you put another polarizer on your camera and you turn it the opposite way. This cuts down the amount of light that's going into the camera dramatically, but it makes it very controlled of what kind of light is hitting the work and then bouncing back to the camera. So that's the extreme way to kind of deal with these sort of things.
I'm wondering about like, as an artist and thinking about accessibility, so like a lot of people use their phones to take pictures. And so if you don't have like a Nikon or like a nicer camera, do you have any advice for somebody who might be using a phone to try to take pictures of their artwork?
Yeah, phones can still do a great job now. It's mostly the same principles, that you just are sometimes limited in what kind of settings you can set on the phone. If it gives you the advanced controls to be able to set things like your shutter speed and aperture and stuff, usually letting the camera do that is fine on its own. It's the color temperature that's the most difficult one to deal with. And that is kind of something you can edit a little bit in post if you get it close. But I would apply the same principles on lighting. If you can find a place where you can control what type of light's hitting the artwork and use the family of angles, you can still get a really good image even on a phone. I think some of them nowadays will even like have a scan tool that you can use that will autocorrect for the parallax as well, if you're having issues with converging lines. Go ahead.
If you're trying to light balance something at home, is there anything you can use if you don't have one of those little splash things?
Yeah, piece of white copy paper works great. Anything that you know is a neutral tone. So if you have like something that's gray is great, but although you want to make sure it's not something that's like a blue gray or has a little bit of brown in it or something. You want to make sure that for you, this is a referenced, like I know this is supposed to be like white or gray. As long as it's that, you can use that as your tool to white balance. I use all sorts of different things. I use the white walls in the gallery. I will use the inside of my camera bag because it's gray. All sorts of things. Some people will buy a gray cord that they use as like a bracelet, and they'll use that as a reference. Yeah, and anything that is a neutral color tone and is being hit by the same light that your artwork is. That's the key part. If it's next to your artwork and it's being hit by the same light, you can use it as your reference. All right, thanks everyone. Great. Oh, go ahead.
One more question.
Yeah.
I kind of, well, maybe you know the answer to this question a little bit, but how often do you find that you are editing things post-production or like post-photo? Like you've done what you can with the lighting, like actually physically in the space, and then you have it in Photoshop. And I don't know this part of it all, so I'm always like, oh, this photo is odd. I'm gonna just like edit out the light thing and hope no one notices in Photoshop. But how often do you have to do that part of it? Because obviously you know so much more about the actual taking of the photograph.
Usually everything always needs a little bit. It's really hard to get it perfect in camera, unless you have like, they make professional copy setups where it's set out on the table, they have the lights all calibrated for you, it's using a phase 1 system that's like perfectly mounted above it, and it can do that stuff. But those systems are like hundreds of thousands of dollars. So we're kind of have to make do with what we got. So in the interest of time, I get as close as I can in camera, but practically almost everything, I do at least a little bit of editing in post. Whether that's even just, I think it's just a little too dark or something, I need to brighten it up a bit.
Do you find you ever have to go in though and like actually edit out like a light source that you really couldn't work with, or like, I don't know, I mean, I understand like maybe changing the tone or the saturation a little bit or something, but do you ever have like a specific piece you have to like go in and lasso out?
If it gets to the point where I'm needing to like use the clone tool or something,
Yeah.
I'll try and go back and get a new photograph.
Yeah.
Some things like if you have glass is the hardest thing. If you can get your photograph your artwork without glass on it, it makes it a lot easier. But some things you just can't avoid, especially like pieces that are metalwork, so fiber art stuff that has metal in it. There's always going to be some reflection. You're not going to get rid of all of it. So you have to decide like how much is okay, what still represents the piece well. Because also some things, if it would normally have sparkles on it and it doesn't have any sparkles in the photo, it looks a little weird almost. But if there's something like a glare from glass or something on it, like that Matted E photo, I'll try and go back and take it again and try to control the light a little more. Yep.
Do you have a favorite puzzle that you had to solve with your artwork?
Favorite puzzle. I kind of enjoy using the guided tools to correct the parallax because I like making things look square on it. But actually, I was even talking to James earlier this week that some artists will be tricky and the artwork is not perfectly straight, or the frames are not perfectly straight. And so at that point, you're kind of like, well, am I guessing? Am I making this look straight when it's not supposed to be or something? That's all things that, there's a little bit of interpretation in that, even in the best of times. So I find that fun. Also, if I end up if I have to go on location and it's like, I have to bring a light, and who knows, it's like in someone's house or something, or we're going to the library and just taking a photo there. Those are kind of fun to deal with because it's completely new. It's very uncontrolled, and so that's our ultimate challenge, to try and get a good representation of your artwork in those scenarios. Anything else? Well, again, thank you so much. I hope you join us for our next one next month. Our new education manager, Alex Anthus, is going to be doing a little artist talk. Yeah, thank you all for coming. This will also be, a recording of this will be up on YouTube at a later date. And so thank you everyone as well who is watching the live stream for the talk. Have a great day.